When the bank's lawyer dialed the number on the deed, his hand was shaking, and the man who answered had been waiting 23 years for that call. So how does a $50 passbook end up costing a billion-dollar bank $57 million? The phone in Marcus Whitfield's hand felt heavier than it should have. He was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower he did not own, and the voice on the line belonged to Davis Crow, and Davis Crow was screaming about a man named Henry Doss. The number on the legal pad in front of Marcus was $57,200,000. The man they owed it to had bought the land for $47. Marcus pressed the phone harder against his ear. He could hear Davis Crow breathing on the other end, fast and uneven. He could hear a chair scrape. He could hear a door slam somewhere in a building he had never been to. Davis Crow said the name again. Henry Doss. Marcus wrote it down. He underlined it twice. He stared at the underlines until they began to blur. Then he set the phone down and walked to the window and looked at a city that was not yet his client's. And he understood finally that something had gone very wrong. 23 years ago, in a small county courthouse none of them had bothered to drive out to. 23 years ago, October 8, 2002. The back room of the Lawson County Courthouse held a folding table, a coffee pot, and 4 men in suits. There was one window. The window faced a parking lot. The coffee in the pot had been there since morning, and nobody was drinking it. Henry Doss stood in the doorway in a denim jacket. He was 41 years old. He had driven 92 miles that morning from a farm in Fremont. His wife, Marlene, had handed him a thermos and a folded sandwich at the door and said only one thing: drive safe. He had nodded. In his left hand, he held a small blue savings passbook. The corner was soft from being folded into a pocket too many times. The balance written on the inside cover was $50. The auctioneer was a loan officer named Gerald Thatcher. He wore a navy blazer that pulled at the shoulders. He was running a clearance sale on parcels nobody wanted, parcels the bank had been carrying on its books for years like dead weight. Parcel 47 was 47 acres of scrub east of an old county road. The opening bid was $1. Henry raised the passbook. Gerald Thatcher looked at him over a pair of cheap reading glasses and laughed. He looked at the woman next to him. She also laughed. Gerald said, "What's in the book, friend?" Henry said, $50. Gerald laughed again. Louder this time. He asked Henry if he was sure he wanted to spend his savings on a strip of weeds. He asked Henry if he understood what scrubland was. He asked Henry if he had ever been to an auction before. Henry said, "I'd like to bid $47. The room went quiet for a moment. Then Gerald shrugged, made a face at the woman next to him, and called it sold. The receipt came across the folding table on a piece of yellow carbon paper. Henry signed it. Gerald did not read it. Henry folded the receipt in half. He folded it again. He put it in the inside pocket of the denim jacket, next to the passbook. Gerald stood up and clapped Henry on the shoulder on his way to the coffee pot. He said, "Hope you got tractor money, friend. That field's not worth digging." Henry said, "Thank you." He walked out into the parking lot. The other 3 men in the room laughed at something Gerald said behind him. Henry heard it through the door. He did not turn around. He drove the 92 miles home in a 1987 Ford pickup with a cracked side mirror and a radio that only got 2 stations. He did not turn the radio on. He drove with both hands on the wheel and the receipt folded against his chest through the denim, and he thought about a 1956 filing he had read in the basement of the records office 2 months earlier. He thought about a strip of land that was 12 feet wide and half a mile long. He thought about a road that had been canceled in 1958. He thought about an easement nobody had ever released. He did not smile. He did not speak. He drove. When he got home, Marlene was at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee already poured. She looked at him. She did not ask. He took the receipt out of his pocket. He set it on the table between them. He smoothed it flat with his hand. She looked at the number. $47. She looked at him. She said, "You got it." He said, "I got it." She nodded. She slid the second cup of coffee across the table. She did not ask what came next. That night after Marlene had gone to bed, Henry sat alone at the kitchen table under a single yellow bulb. He opened the passbook. He took a ballpoint pen out of the drawer where they kept the bills. He wrote one line on the inside cover, under the printed bank logo. Bought 47 acres, Section 14. October 8th, 2002. He closed the book. He folded the receipt into it. He placed both into the inside pocket of the denim jacket and hung the jacket on the peg by the door. He sat back down. He looked at the dark window. Gerald Thatcher had laughed at a $50 passbook. 4 men had laughed in a room with a folding table and a coffee pot nobody drank. The bank had marked one more dead parcel as cleared, and Henry Doss, alone in a quiet kitchen 92 miles from any of them, knew something none of them did. He poured the coffee out. He turned off the bulb. He went to bed. August 14th, 2002. 2 months before the auction, a reading room in the basement of the Lawson County Records Office. Fluorescent lights, one long oak table, a boy of about 16 behind the front counter who did not look up when Henry walked in. Henry asked for the road files, specifically the canceled ones. Specifically anything between 1950 and 1965. The boy pointed to a row of green binders on a shelf nobody had touched in a long time. Henry pulled 3 of them. He sat at the oak table. He opened the first binder. He read for 2 hours without writing anything down. In the third binder, on a brittle page near the back, he found it. A 1956 grant. A strip of land, 12 feet wide, half a mile long. The grantor was Albert Doss, his grandfather. The grantee was Lawson County. The purpose was a planned road expansion off the old county road east of Fremont. The road had been canceled in 1958. The grant had never been released. Henry read the page 3 times. Then he read it a 4th. Under the laws of the state, an unreleased grantor easement on a canceled right-of-way reverted to the original grantor's heirs. As long as the heirs could show a clean line back to the original deed, and as long as the parcel had been continuously taxed without abandonment. Henry's grandfather had given him a small tin box on his 9th birthday. The box was on a shelf in the closet behind the denim jacket. The original deed was inside. Henry closed the binder. He wrote nothing down. He thanked the boy on the way out. He drove home. That night, Marlene set a kettle on the stove and watched him spread a piece of butcher paper across the kitchen table. He drew a square. Inside the square, he drew a thin line running north to south. He marked the line in black. He wrote the year 1956 next to it. He wrote the year 1958 underneath. He wrote his grandfather's name in the corner. The kettle began to whistle. Marlene poured 2 cups. She set one in front of him. She looked at the map. She said, "What is it?" He said, "It's a road that isn't." She looked at him for a long moment. She did not ask anything else. She sat down across from him, and they drank the coffee in silence, and the butcher paper stayed on the table until morning. The next afternoon, Henry drove out to the parcel. He walked the 12-foot strip from the south fence to the north fence. Half a mile. He counted his steps. He marked the corners with 2 stones he carried from the truck. Then he drove home and bid $47 on it. After the auction, the years began to stack up quietly. In 2007, a man with orange survey flags walked the section road in late spring. Henry watched him from the porch through a pair of old binoculars. The man stayed for 2 hours. He left without knocking. In 2011, a small story ran on page 9 of the Fremont paper. A regional water pipeline study, revived from a shelved 2002 plan, was looking at 3 possible corridors east of the county. Henry circled the article in pen. He put it in the notebook Marlene had given him for his 50th birthday, the brown one with the cloth cover. In 2014, the trucks came, 2 white pickups with no markings, then a third. They drove the section line in slow loops. Henry wrote down the dates. He wrote down the times. He started keeping track of the LLCs. Crow Holdings LLC bought 80 acres south of the Strip in 2015. Crow Land Group bought 60 more in 2016. Davis Crow Development bought 140 in 2017 and 2018 in 4 separate deals filed under 4 different names. 280 acres, all of it surrounding the 12-foot strip. None of it usable without the strip. The pipeline corridor, the only legal route through the section, given the wetland on the west and the protected woodland on the east, ran directly under Henry's half-mile of weeds. He sat at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in March of 2018 and looked at the notebook. Marlene poured him a cup. She sat down. She looked at the page. She said, "They don't know." He said, "No, they don't." She nodded. She picked up her own cup. He closed the notebook. He set it on top of the butcher paper map he had drawn 16 years earlier and never thrown away. He pressed his hand flat on the cover. Outside, a coyote called once across the section. The trap was set, and the man who had set it had not raised his voice once in 16 years. A polished black sedan rolled up the gravel drive on a Saturday morning in May of 2019, and a young woman in heels too thin for farm dirt stepped out with a leather folder under her arm. Henry was on the porch with a coffee cup. He set the cup down before he stood up. Her name was Patricia Holloway. She worked for a real estate firm out of Omaha. She had a smile that had been practiced. She said she represented a client who was very interested in the parcel. She said the offer was $85,000. Cash, closing in 30 days. Henry listened. He thanked her. He said no. She blinked. She reset the smile. She said maybe he wanted to think about it. He said, I have. She left her card on the porch railing. The card was still there a week later, soft from the rain. The phone call came in the fall of 2021. A man named Wendell Pratt from the Lawson County Planning Commission, calling on a Monday afternoon while Henry was changing the oil in the truck. Marlene brought the cordless out to the driveway. Henry wiped his hands on a rag and took it. Wendell knew Henry. They had gone to high school together. Wendell explained that the county was prepared to make a friendly offer, well above market, to settle a small matter related to a planned utility corridor. He named the figure. $800,000. Henry held the phone. He looked at the truck. He looked at the small blue passbook he had carried out to the driveway in his back pocket without thinking about it. He said, Wendell, I appreciate the call. He said no. There was a long pause. Wendell said something quiet about being sorry to hear that. Then he hung up. Henry handed the phone back to Marlene. She said, 800,000. He said, She said, you're sure? He said, I'm sure. She went back inside. The kettle was already on. Their daughter Sarah called that evening. She was 34, a real estate lawyer in Omaha, and she had heard from a college friend at the Planning Commission. She did not push. She asked one question. Dad, do you remember when I was 12 and I asked you why you mowed that strip twice a year? He said, I remember. She said, you told me to ask you again when I was 40. He said, that's right. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, okay, Dad. Okay, she hung up. Henry mowed the strip in May and again in September. He paid the annual tax bill on the parcel every spring at the courthouse window. The bill was $28 in 2002. It was $41 in 2023. He paid it in cash. He kept every receipt in the same brown notebook. 23 springs, 23 receipts. In a glass conference room in Omaha, Davis Crow was throwing a binder across the table. Marcus Whitfield was on speaker. Two associates were taking notes nobody would ever read. A junior lawyer was on his feet, pacing, talking about quiet title and abandonment in grantor reversion. Davis Crow was not listening. Davis Crow was looking at a satellite photo of 280 acres with a thin white line running through the middle of it. And he was saying the same word over and over. Strip, strip, strip. He told Marcus to make the offer go away. Marcus drove out to the farm himself in March of 2024. Three-piece suit, leather briefcase, a black sedan washed that morning. Marlene let him in. She poured him a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. She did not sit down. Marcus opened the briefcase. He set a folder on the table. He named the figure, $4,200,000. Lump sum, closing in 2 weeks, confidentiality, mutual release, all expenses covered. Henry looked at the folder. He did not open it. He said no. Marcus said it again, slower. $4 million. Henry said, I heard you. Marcus said something about being reasonable. He said something about the parcel being scrubbed. He said something about Henry not understanding what he was turning down. Henry said, I understand fine. Marcus closed the briefcase. He stood up. He left the coffee untouched. The sedan kicked gravel on its way out. Marlene watched it go from the kitchen window. She said, he didn't drink the coffee. Henry said, no. She said, that's twice now. He smiled, just barely. He picked up the cup Marcus had left and poured it back into the pot. The offers stopped for a while. Then they came back, faster, from new lawyers and new shell companies. 6 million, 8, 11. Henry said no to all of them. The notebook grew thicker. On a Tuesday morning in September of 2025, the phone rang at 7:42. Henry was at the kitchen table. The coffee was already poured. The notebook was open in front of him to a fresh page. The screen showed an Omaha number he did not know. Marlene looked at him from the stove. He set down his cup. He reached for the phone. He answered before the second ring. The voice on the other end was Marcus Whitfield, and Marcus was already mid-sentence, talking too fast, saying something about a hearing, something about a filing, something about a very urgent matter. Henry said, "Slow down." Marcus slowed down. He said the firm had filed a quiet title action. He said the hearing was in 3 weeks. He said the parcel would be ruled abandoned and the easement extinguished, and Henry would walk away with nothing if he did not accept the current offer. The current offer was 18 million. Henry held the phone. He looked at the kettle. He looked at Marlene. He said, "Marcus, I have to call you back." He hung up before Marcus finished his sentence. Marlene set down the dish towel. She said, "Who?" He said, "The lawyer." She said, "What now?" He said, "They're going to court." She nodded once. She picked up the phone and dialed Sarah herself. Sarah drove down from Omaha that Saturday in a gray hatchback with a banker's box in the back seat. She spread the contents across the kitchen table next to the notebook and the butcher paper map and the small tin box from the closet. She read for 90 minutes without speaking. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was not. She said, "Dad, they cannot win this." He said, "I know." She said, "You have everything. The original 1956 grant, the 1958 cancellation, 63 years of tax receipts in your own handwriting and your grandfather's. They cannot prove abandonment. The county itself was the one collecting the taxes. They taxed you on it every year for 23 years. They cannot now claim the parcel was abandoned." He said, "No, they cannot." She made the phone call to Marcus Whitfield from the kitchen table on Sunday afternoon. She used her professional voice. She told him what they were prepared to bring to the hearing. She told him what would happen if they did. She told him what terms her client would accept instead. She listened. She said no. She listened again. She said, "No, Marcus. Not a lump sum." The hearing was held on a Thursday morning in October at the Lawson County District Courthouse. Sarah wore a charcoal suit. Henry wore a shirt Marlene had ironed twice. Marcus Whitfield had 37 exhibits in 3 binders. Sarah placed 3 documents on the table. The 1956 grant, signed by Albert Doss. The 1958 county resolution canceling the road. And the bound stack of 63 years of tax receipts every spring paid to the same county that was now claiming the parcel had been abandoned. She said one line, "You cannot tax a parcel for 63 years and then call it abandoned." The judge read the documents. He took less than a minute. He ruled from the bench. Easement valid, reversion valid, abandonment claim denied with prejudice. Marcus Whitfield reached for his phone before the judge had finished speaking. Sarah negotiated the terms over the next 4 days. Henry refused every lump sum. He set the terms himself on a yellow legal pad at the kitchen table in pencil. Permanent monthly easement payment, $47,500 a month, adjusted for inflation every January, transferable to his heirs. For the operational life of the corridor, which on a regional pipeline meant 50 years minimum, more likely 70. Marcus pushed back once on the inflation clause. Sarah said no. Marcus pushed back on the heirs clause. Sarah said no. Marcus accepted every term on the 5th day. She called her father from the parking lot of the Omaha office. She said, "Dad, it's done." He said, "Good work, kiddo." He hung up. He set the phone on the table. Marlene looked up from the sink. She did not ask. She walked to the stove and put the kettle on. The signing was at the county clerk's office on a Friday morning in November. Henry wore the denim jacket. The passbook was in the inside pocket where it had been for 23 years. He signed his name once, on the last page, in the same ballpoint pen he kept in the kitchen drawer. He walked out to the truck. He sat in the driver's seat. He did not start the engine. He took the brown notebook out of the glove box. He turned to the last page. He wrote one line. Section 14, settled November 14th, 2025, $47 paid, $47,500 monthly received, He closed the notebook. He put it back in the glove box. He started the engine. The story ran on page 2 of the Fremont paper the following week. Davis Crowe declined to comment. Continental Trust declined to comment. Marcus Whitfield was no longer with the firm. Gerald Thatcher had retired in 2014. He read the article on his porch in Lincoln, set the paper down, and did not pick it up again. The 4 men who had laughed in the back room of the courthouse in 2002 said nothing publicly about the auction or the bid or the passbook. There was nothing to say. That night, Henry sat at the kitchen table under the same yellow bulb. Marlene poured 2 cups. She set one across from him. She sat down. She said, 23 years. He said, 23 years. She reached across the table and held his hand for a moment. The kettle was already cooling on the stove. Some men chase money. Henry Doss waited for it to come to him. If you had been Henry, would you have taken the 18 million and walked away? Or held out for the monthly check that pays your grandchildren long after you're gone? Tell me in the comments.